it was really hard for me to put together that compilation. Right? It was really hard for me to do that. It was real hard for me to listen to all of these, these women, rug sweeping Misandry, okay? Or, discounting it, whatnot. They do this shit all the time and whatnot. I gotta be, you know, honest and keep it 100 and whatnot. I have severe PTSD from black female misandry, okay? Alright? I want to be honest about that shit. I'm only human and shit, but we hear this bullshit all the time, and I can't tell you how it makes me feel, or how it makes me feel when I hear it, when I experience it on a bunch of different levels. I'm highly empathic, and this shit be hitting me in a way that like I said, I have severe PTSD. All right, I hate being marginalized and put in a group with other people. It reminds like when I joined the military and shit. I was wholly unprepared. I went to basic training and they pile you in these cattle trucks, these like big, tall, narrow trucks. They just shove you in there ass to ass and shit like groceries, and drive your ass to the where you're gonna be. All right, that's what they do. Right, so it was really, really hard for me to put that together, that compilation. It was extremely hard. All right, so you'll believe me when I say that it makes me feel a certain way about women that look like us, and I realize that I'm bowing. Maybe I'm being unduly influenced and socially engineered and shit, but I was already being unduly socially engineered against my will and shit. This shit has been going on for damn near, well over 100 years. Okay, but I can only speak to my time period and shit. I'm a Generation Xer and shit, and I saw it just blow up and go mainstream in like the early to mid '80s and shit, right? And I was in a nuclear household that became a matriarchal household, if you get my drift. I remember the propaganda being in the house and shit, and how I had to carry water and shit for sins that I never committed and shit, and how that ingrained in me that, the whole white knight narrative that I like never wanted to be the guys that these women hated. I worked against that and ultimately became that for a minute or two, a hot minute. And I look back on it as a life lesson and shit. I didn't have any decent, you know, I didn't have any decent mentoring and shit when I was growing up. Even though I came from a nuclear family that became a matriarchal family and shit, I was left to my own devices in front of the idiot boxes for most of the time and shit. And people had this narrative that I was like some kind of idiot, or like a moron, or, at best a nerd. Hence the geek underground and shit. This shit just it got on me like a funk and a stink and shit. And I carried it through life and shit. Completely self-aware. Completely self-aware and shit. It's like watching a TV show of my own life while I'm experiencing it, or watching these what I called fucking noobs, behave and do things and shit. Like I wasn't looking right at them and shit. Or like I didn't understand what they were doing, what they were saying and shit. I had to make bitter choices and shit. I had to make choices for the greater good sometimes. Just going along to get along and shit, because I knew what the alternative was and shit. When I didn't have the mindset I have now, where I just push everything to its extreme. Make it like it's like a fever. You got to break a fever and shit. Not make the videos I make because I want you gentlemen out there, you kings. You notice I never say princess, right? I never say that. I call you a prince, and I'm like, I'll call everybody kings, man, as much. And sometimes I use the N word too. I don't give a fuck. It's my platform. But most of lately I've been using the word king because I want to ingrain that into us. I was unduly socially engineered and shit, and I was abused. Okay, and then I was abused. It was psychological and spiritual and physical and shit. You know, and I tried not to be the guys that you heard women complaining about. It been incessant gossip and chatter and shit, and no empathy, no humanity and shit. And I saw the other males in the family, not including myself. I saw them just give up on life and not have any fucking direction and be led around by the nose. Okay? And I just didn't feel that way and shit. I had a certain idea about what I wanted my life to be, and I was kind of getting there and shit, and I made like some really bad decisions and shit as far as a life partner. Not getting out soon enough from the house. And I like to, since I was doing this shit, I feel like a lemming and shit, like an idiot sometimes. I really don't want anybody to follow in my footsteps like that, at least in a negative. All right? I should have got the fuck out. I should have been trying to get the fuck out when I was like 17. I should just said chucked it or something. Got the fuck out. If going to be extreme about it, I should have tried to get myself put in foster care and shit. I would have had a better chance in life. Not to be, it would be no geek underground today and shit. But maybe I'd be living a more fulfilling life with the nuclear family that I actually wanted and shit. My entire life I had looked at dysfunction and all manner of horror, you know, behind those doors. All manner of horror and shit. And it was duly, like, it was like being smothered because nobody was actually listening to me or ever talking to me in my entire fucking life. I'm 56 and shit. And I was gone for a period of time. I returned and shit. And they were frozen in time. But everything had decayed around them and shit. There was this pervasive sense of decay that I can't even describe. The smell, this feeling and shit. It made me very ill and shit. I was almost disheveled for a time and shit. But leaving that area, out of necessity and shit, you know, out of necessity, I've been regaining my mobility and shit. You know, they were spinning a narrative that I was lacking, upstairs on top of shit because they wanted to do insurance fraud and everything. And it was sad to watch and shit. I thought about my family, on both sides and shit. They failed. They failed me. Right? I love them so much. I give so much of myself to them. They give nothing in return. Not even a handful of dirt. And I thought about my grandparents and shit. They had great stories, great lives, long lives, many children, all that. And none of their children were worth shit. Not one of them motherfuckers on either side of the family and shit. And I can just draw a line straight to Misandry that had started happening during the baby boomer shit. It started getting real bad and shit. It's almost like somebody made some kind of pact with the devil or something. Because as I watched most of the men become non-issues in the family and be excoriated and talked down upon and physically abused as well as myself. Emotionally abused. I don't know what's worse, the physical abuse or the emotional abuse. I don't know. I know one thing though. I can tell you with certainty that misandry is as dangerous as this supposed misogyny. They talk about these patriarchal, bring it down to patriarchy and all that bullshit. Well, you people outside that, you white people, you Spanish people, you Asian people, especially you Chinese people, you anybody else people and shit, I can tell you, we're the canaries in the coal mine, the black people. And I can tell you it's not looking good. Okay? You come into our communities and you look at what the condition is and you'll see what you will become with what they call a feminism and shit. It's not feminism, it's hate. And it's hate speech, it's hate everything. They hate everything. They want everything and no fucking responsibility. They don't want to do shit. They don't want to work. They don't want to do nothing. And they frame everything like a business and it's transactional and shit. It's not organic. They cannot sustain itself because they don't have any accountability. Going up in my mouth. They don't have any self-accountability or nothing. All they know is that they want baubles. They want bags and shoes and they want the unconditional fealty. They don't want your love. That is the last thing they want. They want your validation. It's not. They call it love, but it's validation and shit. They want your adulation and shit. Your blind adulation while they abuse you with so many levels and destroy your motherfucking family. They cannot raise proper men. They raise males. These are men with feminine, behaviors. Not shit. I'm telling you, I grew up in a nuclear. I'm lucky that my family started out as a classic nuclear family, a successful nuclear family and shit. It imploded and it became a matriarchal family, and I suffered. And I went without, and I had to get everything I ever got. I earned blood from a rock. And then when I came back, I saw everybody that they favored, everybody that they loved, None of them were productive. Okay, they didn't know how to function without the boomer class of, you know, under, giving them, monetary, support and everything. They didn't know how to function. They couldn't function. They weren't functioning. All these the boomers who had, uh, you know, wrongly supported them all those years, and did not force them not to grow up and have no accountability, and should have spoiled them, gave them, some of them were given, careers they didn't necessarily care about shit. And what they do with that power, they abuse that power and shit. They abuse that power, and the worst of it all is not even that, but just me going back there out of extreme necessity, finding that I was supposedly in a Roach Motel and shit. Check in, don't check out, but I checked out. The worst thing about it was, they still, I was frozen in time to these people. They're so ignorant. The misandry made them blind to, the geek underground. They made them blind. They couldn't see me. All right. This ain't about no understanding, no love and shit. They severely underestimated me. They underestimated how I felt about them and shit. I loved them unconditionally and shit, but I wasn't stupid enough, and I had to make decisions based on, I had a small child with me and everything. So it's kind of like a hostage situation. So I had to eat some pablum and do things I didn't want to do, just to get things. It's a miracle I'm here today to make these videos. All right. Now I wanted to I posted the preceding, you know, compilation and shit, because that's just a small snippet of what is actually out there shit in the community. It's why, I support, in leaving the community and going abroad, and these women, as they starting to chase us up overseas and shit, try to pop up where we at and shit. And it's just like, look, once you get out, don't go back to that shit. Don't interact with them. Okay? If you see some chick over in another country chasing your ass, she's over there to drag your ass back to that shit. Right? She's over there to force her social engineering on you. You're gonna be in a codependent, fucked up relationship. Well, I'm just being honest about it. Okay? Being fucking honest. I don't feel like, I have to say some, not all, because it really is some, not all, and shit, but some good ones, not the rest. That we throw it in kind of in the garbage. Okay, don't want to be in a codependent relationship. You don't want to be treated like, you don't want to be infantilized and shit. You don't want to have someone that's not there working for you. They just want you to go to work and do all this shit, give them all of your resources so they can, fuck it off. They can just spend it off. They're not thinking about the future, and even if they have investments and properties and all that, they're not gonna have that shit at the end of the day. Okay, they're gonna shit it, piss it away, and you're gonna stay a small cog in a big, rusty, broken down machine that needs to be turned off. Right? That's the only reason why I would describe myself as a misogynist anarchist and shit. Okay, I don't want anyone to follow in my specific footsteps and shit. And the people that were there that knew what was going on and everything and saw the abuse and did nothing, they deserve nothing and shit. I can't see them as, I can't see them as any part of me anymore. Right? It's the most painful thing I've ever experienced and shit. I've been through the ringer and whatnot. Not just, I come to social media and I make videos because I want to give something back. All right, I want some good to come of the wasted life that I've lived. Okay, at the basis of it all, I wanted to have my own family. Right, I want to have my own wife, my children, that we would raise together and love each other, love our children, build a decent family tree, because what I came from on both sides of the family line is malignant and destructive. Okay? I spent so many years hating the winter holidays. When I went my first year of college, man, it was just start going to rot. Right? I can tell you some shit I don't feel like I need to. But I want to explain that, why I put these videos out, shit. I don't hate black women. I hate black misandrists, okay? I see them as different from black women. I hate black misandry. This is the way most of black women see themselves as a separate race, independent of black men and shit. And therefore, they make themselves insolvent to build or do anything with, or even lay down with and shit. I don't want to share a bed with them if they have this mindset. If you hate men, if you want to talk shit and all that crap, I don't want nothing to do with you. Okay? And if you get in my way, I'm going to run through your ass like wet tissue paper and shit. If you take me down, it doesn't do shit. I'm already dead. Okay? I'm already dead. Okay? I'm already robbed clean. Okay? My children are already stripped of their heritage because of the greed and the selfishness and the inhumanity, of the women, that were supposed to be nurturing and take care of things and shit. That's the role they wanted. Okay? When I was growing up, they told me I was the man of the house, but that was ceremonial. I was only the man of the house as far as doing manual labor, okay, and taking lumps and being verbally abused and shit, and being emotionally attacked and shit, and gaslit out my ass and shit, laughing my ass off inside my head, knowing these motherfuckers were doing the shit and they weren't even looking me in the eye. All the haters, everybody always uh, came to me more than one. It wasn't a one person doing shit. It was always some kind of, they always had the cheat code and shit. They didn't do nothing. Okay, all that bullshit, I'm on the Captain America time. I can do this all day, right? And I do. And I will until I'm in my coffin, goddammit. Right? None of them motherfuckers amounted to shit. Outside of me doing their shit, doing their Avengers Endgame shit on me to fuck me over and do all this shit and try to, I don't know, emotionally destroy me when they didn't realize they had done that shit like 30 plus years ago, and I rebuilt myself several times over. I just looked at it like this. I'm very clinical about it. I'm like, okay, you've accomplished your mission, your shitty mission to be an agent of chaos and destroy several bloodlines in the future, the past, and the present and shit. Trust me on this. And what do you have to show for it? Nothing. Okay, you got some money, and you got some shit, some property you stole, and you got some laughs and yucks, and you laid up with, women. The woman I laid up with had my first kid. Probably caught some shit, and what do you really have to show for it and shit? Nothing. I got nothing for you. I got no love, no nothing, no respect, no nothing. You people are, you're not even ghosts. I cried for I cried for my parents, who were suspiciously, whose demise was suspicious. I have never gotten any decent explanation or, for their deaths. Okay? Alright? And, things are what they are, right? I think about my grandparents and shit. And think about my ancestors, which includes a noted figure in black history and shit. And maybe some distant relatives, one of them which is mainstream misandrist right now and shit. It appeared in a number of Tyler Perry movies. Think about it. Why would I want to associate myself with that shit? Right? All the men, there are no men left. When I go, I take the family with me. Okay? When I go, the family goes with me. Everything goes with me. And I have one son that I'm raising right now, and I've already talked with him that he will be a brand new, tree. Like a bit of my heritage, something I can leave behind for myself. Hopefully, you never know how things are going to turn out. But he won't be connected to what came before, because what came before is nothing. It's ash and dirt. And there's nothing there. There's no integrity, no morals. Nothing was passed down. Everything was burned away because some people were greedy and wanted money. Right? They wanted money. They just wanted to fuck around. They wanted to play all day. And they didn't want to do anything like build a family or any of that bullshit. They talk a good game, but they're nobody and shit. They're a loser. Demon time and shit. Right? They abuse themselves and they abuse the children that came out of their motherfucking wombs. Right? Those kids are fucked. Right? I had to watch my first, niece asking, her parent, what was wrong, while the parent was regurgitating continuously on her ass. And then years later, she's fucking around doing the same shit, fucking up her kids and shit. And I'm like, man, it's your body, your motherfucking choice and shit. And you blame us for the shitty choices that you make. The men that you choose to have kids with and the fucked up parenting that you do, you force your other kids to try to help you raise these kids. Nobody don't know what the fuck they're doing, and then you wonder why they're not productive and shit, and why they don't give a fuck about you, and why they have a level of inhuman indifference and shit. And then, when all else fails, point the finger, at me. Somebody who squeezed blood from a rock so many times and will do so many times in the future and shit. You know, it's me, right? It's me. So I decided that, I would make this channel and try to do something, try to give something of myself back and shit. I do, it's not perfect or anything and shit. It's just, what I find interesting or whatever, what I feel like sharing of myself and shit. This is the most I've shared of myself across 5 channels, right? And I want you men out there, kings, to know that you matter, that you really are kings and whatnot, that you have a heritage, a lineage that stretches across bloodlines to each other, that you carry everything on your back, all these burdens, and you persevere. You like Atlas, you're carrying the heavens on your shoulders while somebody's got these sticks and clubs and knives beating at your knees and legs that you're trying to make you fall. And you do that because you know you have to. Because if you don't, there won't be nothing there for them to steal anyway. Alright? I make these videos because I want you, man, to never doubt yourself, to always love yourself. I don't care where you are in the world. Okay? I don't care if you're laying in the gutter or if you're sitting in a mansion and shit somewhere. I don't care, shit. I want you to love each other and respect each other and shit. Okay? This is the only thing I can say. I don't frame it in any kind of rhetoric and shit. Pro-black, pan-Africanism, any of that bullshit, any of the pills. But I do advocate one thing, is that you save yourself, black men.